Chapter 573. What about Fu Rong and Sun Yilin? Have you dealt with them? Jingwan asked. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. His reaction was different from before. It was just mediocre. No, it's locked up. Locked up? I'm afraid it's not just locked up. Not dead, at least several layers of skin have been shed. There's something wrong with Sun Yilin, and there's something wrong with Fu Rong. Isn't it obvious? Ah, Yuan, you know what I mean. Don't try to get away with it. Jingwan looked at him faintly. So rational, so calm, Li Hongyuan felt that he was a little suspicious of Jingwan, who always followed him and indulged him. However, his wife was so attractive now. He wanted to rub her into his bones and blood. I'll leave them to you to deal with, okay? Li Hongyuan compromised, as if he was angry, and kissed Jingwan hard on the mouth. Jingwan didn't react on the surface, but her heart was completely soft. She knew how possessive this man was, and she also knew that he was not so calm now. However, because it was her, he was willing to control himself. He could put away all negative emotions. His real thoughts might be that he couldn't wait to tear those two people, especially Sun Yilin, into pieces. Jingwan reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She buried her face in his neck and didn't speak. At this time, silence was better than words. Li Hongyuan smiled silently, gentle but cruel. Jingwan walked out of the door and prepared to stretch her muscles and bones a little. Then, she smelled something different in the air. Jingwan's sense of smell was much sharper than that of ordinary people. What's more, she was afraid that ordinary people could smell something different. When they entered this call yesterday, there were only a few of them. Now, it seemed that only their own people were left. Although they had expected such a situation, were those people dead? Jingwan frowned slightly. That was a real enemy. There would be no mercy. Killed them all. Yes. Li Hongyuan replied, but he didn't hide it. So, when will we leave? We've been out for a long time. Grandmother and the others should be worried. Maybe we'll have to wait. They couldn't leave now even if they wanted to. Are there a lot of enemies outside? Jingwan guessed. This place is near a mountain range on the western border of Qiyuan. Further west is a small country. When the previous dynasty ruled this territory, the country of Zhang was still the territory of the previous dynasty. When the great ancestor rose up, in the flames of war, a local official took advantage of the situation and ceded the land to become the king, establishing the country of Zhang. When Qiyuan was just established, the country was not stable, and the mountain range on the side was a natural barrier. Zhang was easy to defend and difficult to attack, so Qiyuan allowed the existence of Zhang. Later, Zhang voluntarily submitted to Qiyuan and paid tribute, so, for 100 years, there was peace. But now, things have changed. Li Hongyuan gave the answer in another way. Zhang betrayed Qiyuan and sided with the southern Qi kingdom. That's right. Although there's a mountain range on the side, a road was opened up in the early years. It's connected to Qiyuan and formed an official road. Every year, Zhang country pays tribute and uses this road. It's difficult for a large army to travel, but if it's only a few hundred people, it's not a problem at all. Our current position is only a few dozen li away from that official road. It was not a military fortress, so the number of people guarding it was quite limited. Moreover, it was the border between two countries. Naturally, there was a certain amount of trade. There were always a few people coming and going. Otherwise, they could change the route in advance. It was not difficult to cross the mountains with light luggage. Jingwan knew it. They couldn't have chosen such a place for no reason. Wan, there may be some obstacles later. It's probably not just weapons. Don't be afraid. We will definitely return to the capital safely. Jingwan chuckled. Why should I be afraid? Don't worry. Even if I'm a burden, I'll do it with a clear conscience. I'll stay where it's the safest. I won't run around, and I won't try to be brave. That's how it should be. Li Hongyuan kissed her. Moreover, you're not a burden. You're a treasure worth protecting with everything. She didn't know if it was worth it to protect her with everything he had, but she knew that he would do it. In addition, even if he didn't show it, she could feel it. It seemed that because of what happened before, someone seemed to be insecure. She could guarantee that even when she was asleep, he didn't leave her side for half a step. When he was asleep, he hugged her, and when he was awake, he looked at her. In this relationship, he was actually the passive one. As strong as he was, there were times when he was worried about gains and losses. Jingwan touched the corner of his lips. Ah, Yuan, you can do whatever you want. Really, you don't have to endure so hard. In the past, she had told him that if it wasn't necessary, he should try his best not to kill. But now, she didn't want to say this anymore. He should live freely and do whatever he wanted. There was no need to wrong himself. They had come to this point today. What else could they not accept from each other? No matter what kind of person he was, even if he was really sick or really perverted, she would accept it all. No matter what kind of karma he had, she would accompany him. When Li Hongyuan heard this, a fierce light flashed in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. It was really undisguised wickedness. He held Jingwan's hand and kissed her fingertips. He didn't say anything, but it was enough to show his happy mood. As for what to do next, it was another story. When Jingwan saw this, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Someone is going to be unlucky. However, the thought only flashed through her mind, leaving no trace behind. No matter who that unlucky person was, whether they were dead or alive, they could no longer arouse her emotions. Jingwan still lived her life. Gong Jiu had prescribed her miscarriage prevention medicine. Although the conditions were limited now, this was after all a backer. Even if there was no ready-made medicine, she could still think of a way. Every time before and after the medicine, she would take her pulse. Other people took her pulse once every 3 days. Now, she took her pulse 3 times a day, far more than that. Li Hongyuan also changed his medicine frequently. This kind of medicine was ready-made. When they left White Dragon Temple, after all, the road ahead was very dangerous. The most probably was the medicine. In addition, Gong Jiu also gave him acupuncture to accelerate the healing of the wound. In the current situation, a healthy body was far better than an injured body. After all, his martial strength was there. If he couldn't move because of his injury, he would waste more than just a portion of his combat strength. However, he was injured. It was not something that could be healed in a day. Did Jingwan regret her stab? She still didn't. She would feel heartache, she would worry, but she did not regret it. Li Hongyuan did not hide the situation outside from her. When the people below reported to him, she listened at the side. The situation was more serious than expected. Thinking about it, since Prince Jin of Qi Yuan knew that Zhang Guo was colluding with Southern Qi, then for his own safety, it was imperative to get rid of Li Hongyuan. After all, no matter what ambitions or plans Southern Qi had for Qi Yuan, before they succeeded, it was all empty talk. And no matter how bad Qi Yuan was, if they were determined to deal with the traitor Zhang Guo would not have the slightest ability to resist. Therefore, before Southern Qi realized its annexation of Qi Yuan, at least the large territory bordering Zhangguo and Southern Qi would become Southern Qi's possession. Zhangguo would not publicly acknowledge Southern Qi as a vassal. Meeting behind the scenes was one thing, but betraying on the surface was another. Dealing with Li Hongyuan had originally been Southern Qi's plan. The saint of the barbarians, Ruan Fangfei, was the main executor. In the middle of this, there were many people who cooperated with her. In short, because they knew that Prince Jin of Qi Yuan was not a small matter, controlling such a person was far more valuable than directly killing him. The chances of success were very high. Some people in Southern Qi, because they understood the emotion sealing curse, believed that after planting it in Li Hongyuan, they already had the overall situation under control. When the people of Zhonggua acted, it was only to add a layer of protection. They did not think that it would be used at all, so they were so thoroughly exposed to Li Hongyuan. And the result was that Ruan Fangfei died. It must be said that the curse in Ruan Fangfei's body was not just one or two types. When she died, some people in Southern Qi, thousands of li away, already knew. The people of Zhonggua hidden in the mountains also knew. There was nothing much to say. Since they couldn't use someone with great ability, they could only be completely eradicated. If one person could not kill him, then 10. If 10 could not kill him, then 100. In short, they could not let him leave alive. Jingwan looked in the direction of the exit of the colonel. Although it was not the only way out of here, if they retreated into the mountains, it would probably be even more disadvantageous. She herself was the biggest problem. She lowered her head and looked at her belly. Indeed, in the beginning, it was correct to wait for everything to settle down before having a child. However, this child did indeed have a special meaning. Jingwan was full of expectations for it, in various ways. The people outside were certain that they would not enter the mountains, so they did not attack with all their strength at the beginning. It was nothing more than relying on their numbers and wanting to fight a battle of attrition. However, they did not know that Li Hongyuan had brought out shadow guards. Shadow guards were the least afraid of a battle of attrition. They had undergone endurance, hunger, and other training. When the other side could no longer increase their numbers, in the end, it was not clear who would win and who would lose. However, when the other side discovered this, the peace on the surface would soon be broken. It had been almost 18 hours since Ruan Fangfei's death. The other side should have almost figured out some things. Even if they wanted to continue to delay, the other side would not wait any longer. As the saying goes, a long night means trouble. Even if they were at the border, after all, it was the territory of Qi Yuan. More than 10 miles away, there was a garrison of Qi Yuan. Even if there were fewer people, they were more than the people from Zhang State. Once they were alarmed, the roles of the hunter and the prey would be reversed. This night, it was estimated that there would be a hard battle. The sky had already darkened. The light in the room was only a small one, which could illuminate an inch of the room. Jingwan leaned on Li Hongyuan and did not say anything. At this time, there was no need to say anything. Gong Jiu took Jingwan's pulse again. Actually, Jingwan felt that it was unnecessary. How many times had he done it today? Nothing happened to her. What problem could there be? However, her husband insisted and Gong Jiu was never careless when he took her pulse. Even if he had to do it once every 2 hours, he wouldn't do it half-heartedly. Forget it, it was just taking her pulse. However, this time, Gong Jiu's pulse reading time seemed to be unusually long. Jingwan's mind wandered for a while, but it was still not over. Her heart couldn't help but thump. Could it be that something went wrong? Li Hongyuan's brows also wrinkled. When Gong Jiu stopped, he asked, "What's wrong?" Replying to Wang Ye, Wang Fei's body is no different from before. However, after checking her pulse today, this subordinate realized a problem. Wang Fei was poisoned by a sleeping goo. This is a fact that can be confirmed. Sun Yilin asked Fu Rong to remove the sleeping goo and took Wang Fei away from White Dragon Temple. Normally, no matter what kind of goo worm it was, whether it was removed from the body or died in the host's body and disappeared, the traces of the goo worm in the host's body should be maintained for about 3 months. However, from Wang Fei's condition, there is no trace of the goo worm in her body. Jingwan sat up a little straighter, and Li Hongyuan's face also showed a bit of seriousness. Go and bring Fu Rong here. Originally, Jingwan was going to deal with Fu Rong and Sun Yilin after returning to the capital. As for what to do, she would think about it at that time. But now, it seemed that Fu Rong had other uses. If she wanted to harm Jingwan, her performance at the beginning was wrong. When Jingwan saw Fu Rong, she was a little surprised. No matter what, she was much better than expected. It seemed that her face was a little worse, and it didn't look like she was tortured. This servant greets Wang Ye and Wang Fei. She still regarded herself as Jingwan's maid and didn't forget her duty. Fu Rong, what method did you use to remove the sleeping goo for me? Moreover, I was indeed poisoned by a substitute goo before, right? Looking at Fu Rong, she lowered her eyebrows and narrowed her eyes. Fu Rong, are you really not going to say anything? Fu Rong was silent for a moment, then she slightly raised her head and looked at Jingwan. This had already crossed the line. After learning the rules, it was the first time she made such a mistake. Fu Rong concisely said her own background, and concealed all the bitterness. It was the Minister of Rights, Su Darren, who protected this servant's chastity when he was the governor. He is not a person of the Qi Yuan, but a person of the former Wei, and his status is not low. They clearly gave this servant a miserable fate, but they still want this servant to work for them. Based on what? Even if this servant's background is low, this servant still has a human life. Some things naturally have to be returned. Good, Jingwan also understood the meaning of Fu Rong. That was, those people dominated her fate. She was angry and unreconciled, and wanted to retaliate. However, she was just a weak woman, and she didn't have that ability. So she borrowed force, and the target of this force was of course Jin Qin Wang. Therefore, she meekly accepted the task given to her by those people and put a goo on Jingwan. In essence, it was not to hurt Jingwan, but to anger Li Hongyuan. She believed that Li Hongyuan would eventually find out about the former Wei. At that time, the former Wei would more or less pay the price. The price paid by a country, no matter how small, was far more than her own hatred. Although she still couldn't find the real culprit, at least she could be a little comforted. Not to mention Jingwan, even when Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Rong, there was a slight change in his eyes. He really didn't see that Fu Rong had such a temperament. The firmness in her heart had never been smoothed out. Even if she accepted her fate, she didn't accept it. She looked docile and harmless, but once the bottom line of her tolerance was exceeded, then she would secretly show her claws and use her intelligence to plot little by little. In fact, until now, Fu Rong wanted to borrow Li Hongyuan's power to deal with the former Wei. Although, even if she didn't do anything, Li Hongyuan still wouldn't let the former Wei go. However, whether she did or not, the nature was different. What's more, she accurately and ruthlessly stepped on Li Hongyuan's weak spot. Li Hongyuan chuckled. Women like Fu Rong existed in large numbers. He never put them in his eyes, but now he was ruthlessly used. This experience was quite fresh. Jingwan glanced at him. She could feel the danger in his eyes. No matter how he acted in front of her, he had absolute pride. In his eyes, Fu Rong was like an ant. It would be strange if he was happy to be played by an ant. But now, this was not the main point. Fu Rong, what's the matter with the sleeping insect and the substitute insect? In response to Wang Fei, this matter begins with the true identity of this servant's mother. They all believe that this servant's mother is an ordinary woman. This is true, but not completely true. This servant's mother is actually from Nanqi, a barbarian tribe. Speaking of this, Jingwan didn't know what expression to show. When I was young, father wasn't around all year round. Mother was with me almost every day. At that time, she told me a lot of things over and over again. Perhaps I didn't understand, but it would be hard for me to not remember after hearing it over and over again. As for her past, she didn't say much. I vaguely remember that she was the daughter of the leader of the barbarian tribe. In addition, she was very talented in raising insects. She was secretly chosen to be the saintess. However, I don't know what happened later. She left her home and was in the situation of the former way, where her life and death were controlled. She didn't raise any more insects. I don't know if it was because she couldn't raise any more, or if there was some other reason. She didn't raise any more insects until her death. As for the insects of the barbarian tribe, she told me everything. However, she only told me the signs of being infected and the method to cure it. As for how to raise the insects, she didn't say a word. When she was dying, she gave me a bead. A bead that can cure hundreds of poisons and eliminate hundreds of insects. It is said that it is a sacred object that has been passed down for thousands of years in the barbarian tribe. Because of it, the sleeping insect and the substitute insect in your body were eliminated. It was also because of it that I was able to get the medicine from the Gong family's hospital when I was in the mansion. Hand over the bead, and I can spare your life. Fu Rong was silent. She lowered her eyes and glanced at the Buddha bead on Jingwan's wrist. Li Hongyuan sneered, "You don't want to hand it over. When you die, I can always find it and take it away." Wait, Jingwan held Li Hongyuan's hand. She remembered that Fu Rong had said something profound to her before. Now she thought about it. "Fu Rong, is that bead with me? Since you cured me of the insect, you haven't taken it back, right? I can't repay your kindness. It's useless for a person like me to take it." Fu Rong admitted in a disguised way. "But, where did you put it? I don't even have a purse on me now. It's been so long." It's impossible for her not to notice that there is one more thing on her body. Because of doubts, she slightly lowered her head. Then, her eyes suddenly fixed on the Buddha bead. This is the only bead on her body. The question is it possible? Jingwan reached out her hand and fiddled with the beads one by one. That bead is quite strange. It can change its appearance within a certain range. As long as the size is about the same, it will change into the appearance of the nearest bead. Did that mean that there was an alien in her Buddhist prayer beads from the beginning? Jingwan's expression was a bit stiff. This is, the insect can go against the heaven, and the bead has become a spirit. The effect of the insect can barely be regarded as something in the insect's body that targets human nerves, hormones, or other things. But this bead, is it possible that there is something in the body of the chameleon in it? But the chameleon is alive. Even if the existence of the chameleon itself is unscientific, Jingwan still needs some time to accept it when she encounters something unscientific. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's wrist. His acceptance was much higher than Jingwan's. Such a good thing, he will try his best to get it for Jingwan. Now that it is with Jingwan, he will not be polite. However, it is for Jingwan to use, so naturally, it must be absolutely safe. Therefore, Li Hongyuan directly took off the Buddha bead and handed it to Gongjiu. Without Li Hongyuan's explanation, Gongjiu also knew his intention. There are many poisons in Gongjiu's body, and in the house where Wan Fangfei lived before, there are many poisonous insects. It is very easy to verify its function. As for its safety, in fact, during this period, Jingwan has been carrying it with her all the time. There is no abnormality in her body, which is already very good proof. If it is harmful, even if it is very small, after such a long time, there will be more or less signs. And if it takes a few years for the harm to appear, then even Li Hongyuan will probably not wait so long. No matter how suspicious he is, he will not go to this extent. If she doesn't wear it, it may lead to the treasure being covered in dust. The result of the verification was quite obvious. When those poisonous insects touched the Buddha bead, they turned into smoke in an instant and disappeared without a trace. And when the rabbit carried the Buddha bead, Gong Jiu sprinkled all kinds of poisons on it or directly poured it down its mouth. It was more than enough to poison hundreds of people to death, but the rabbit was still alive and kicking. Hearing it was naturally not as shocking as seeing it. This bead is really a good thing. Do you know the range of effect of this bead? Li Hongyuan asked Fu Rong. Wang Ye, forgive me, this slave doesn't know. She had obtained something from her mother, but she had never had the chance to verify it. Perhaps she had, such as poison or something. After all, she had probably gotten in the way of the other sisters. However, she had been unknowingly dealt with, so she naturally had no way of knowing. Wang Ye, this subordinate knows something at this moment. Gong Jiu said. Li Hongyuan was already used to the memories that popped up from time to time in the past few days. The sacred object of the barbarian tribe does have such a function. For the poisonous insects, direct contact is what you saw just now. If you don't touch it, it will take some time, at most 3 days. Wearing the sacred object, it is basically impossible for the poisonous insects to get close to the body. If there is an accident, it will not affect the host. Like any poison, the maximum range of effect is 10 feet. Chapter 574. No matter why the barbarians worshipped their most precious treasure as a sacred object, it had nothing to do with Jingwan. Li Hongyuan also understood some problems, so he put the beads back on Jingwan's wrist without hesitation. Li Hongyuan could take all the good things in the world for himself, but Jingwan couldn't. Although she didn't deny that she wanted this thing very much, if she had it from the beginning, then there wouldn't be a series of things later. However, there was a contradiction in itself. If Fu Rong gave it to Jingwan early, Fu Rong wouldn't have the capital to take revenge. The premise of Fu Rong's betrayal was that she could ensure Jingwan's safety. After achieving her goal, she did not hesitate to give the treasure to Jingwan. She might have thought about it in the past, but at that time, Jingwan was protected by Li Hongyuan so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak out. The barbarian tribe's holy relic seemed to be just icing on the cake. Now that Fu Rong had given the treasure to Jingwan for no reason, she, who was already not very trustworthy, was afraid that it would only lead to more suspicion. Therefore, even if she wanted to give the treasure, she needed to look at the right time. As for Li Hongyuan, to be honest, his weight in Fu Rong's heart was really low. His identity as a prince may not be comparable to the identity of Jingwan's husband. What Fu Rong praised most about him was his deep love for Jingwan. Because he didn't have any weight, Fu Rong didn't hesitate to use him. Jingwan fiddled with the beads, but she didn't take them off in the end. First, her husband would definitely not allow it. Second, she wanted it anyway, so there was no need to pretend. The problem now was how to deal with Fu Rong. She took her things, and she didn't betray her. According to reason, the previous things should be written off. However, she was indeed poisoned by the sleeping insect, and then her husband was taken out of the capital and fell into a series of dangerous situations. Fu Rong's actions were the cause of everything. In the big picture, it was not excessive to punish her. It was not something that could be offset by a bead. She wanted to punish her a little, but her husband wouldn't let her go easily after knowing that he was tricked. Some people's dignity was often more unforgivable than a true betrayal or a true crime. Seeing that you are sensible, I can spare you from death, but you can't escape punishment. Ah Yuan, let Fu Rong make up for her mistakes. You said to let me deal with it. Jingwan said. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. Jingwan's eyes were very firm. Obviously, she already had a plan in her heart. Li Hongyuan snorted softly, which meant that he acquiesced. Fu Rong, the person who contacted you in the White Dragon Temple was Sun Yilin, and the people who traveled with you along the way. Except for the few of them, the others were probably all dead. We want to let them believe that you are still not exposed, and then we will send some news to them. What do you think? However, there is a lot of danger in this matter, so you can refuse. There was not only one way to atone for her mistakes. Fu Rong was very smart. Fu Rong was a very smart person. Not only was she a fast learner, in fact, if she was given enough conditions, she would not be worse than several women in the palace. Moreover, she had advantages in some aspects. For example, after living in a brothel for many years, it was easy for her to please someone, especially men. For example, she had a lot of ups and downs in her life, so she did not care much about her life. Moreover, even though she had experienced so much, her heart was not corrupted. She still had humanity and knew how to be grateful. For the current Minister of Rights, Su Darren, who was a black-hearted person, in fact, he would not like people like him, because he knew best that people like him would do anything to achieve their goals. There were some things that they could do themselves, but the people below them absolutely could not do that. Therefore, if all kinds of advantages were used properly, they might play an unexpected role. Fu Rong listened quietly, and her eyes flashed slightly. Wang Fei, this servant is willing. If possible, this servant also wants to take revenge on her own. She put a gu in Jingwan and used Li Hongyuan. Her purpose was not simple. Because of the unwillingness and resentment in her heart, she used the strength of others to achieve her goal. How could it be better than doing it herself and participating in it personally? It had to be said that Fu Rong was really unexpected again and again. The things hidden in her bones were too different on the surface. However, in the end, the culprit who made her what she was today was the royal family of the former Wei. Using a weak woman's body to compete with them was undoubtedly like an ant trying to shake a tree. Fu Rong, have you thought about it? This is not a joking matter. Your Highness, I originally thought that everything that happened in the past was due to my bad luck, but since I was able to meet Your Highness, it meant that I wasn't completely bad. If I could serve Your Highness for the rest of my life, it would be an excellent thing. However, someone came out and told me that everything was man-made and wanted me to serve Your Highness for the rest of my life. It's just that my bones haven't completely softened yet, so I have to repay you for the rest of my life. It would be good if I could repay you with 20 or 30%. It would be even better if I could repay you with 50 or 60%. How could this be called bones are not completely soft? She was made of iron. Her appearance looked soft and easy to pinch, but if you really took a bite, you might break a mouthful of teeth. Such a talent, if she was placed by her side as a servant, it would definitely be wasted. However, thinking about the spies sent by other countries to Qi Yuan, the top spies were all women, but they could not be clean and innocent. Whether they were really dissolute or forced, in short, they did not have a good ending in the end. Jingwan did not want Fu Rong to go to this step. Moreover, she did not have any training. Wan, don't worry. I also have people in the former Wei. When the time comes, I will send people to help her. Of course, the so-called help is also surveillance. In Li Hongyuan's eyes, there is a stain on her that cannot be easily washed away. Besides, there is still a lot of things waiting for us to deal with in the Qi Yuan. It will take a lot of time to arrange for her to go to the former Wei. During this time, she can learn some things, but she does not need to learn too much. Specially trained spies and ordinary spies have their own uses. The former may not be better than the latter. Many times, it depends on how they are used. Li Hongyuan looked at Fu Rong's face. When imperial consort Su wanted her to be Li Hongyuan's concubine, she resolutely disfigured her face. Anyway, it is already disfigured. She will be infected with a goo and become even uglier. At that time, probably no man will want to covet her. Li Hongyuan did not even need to guess. He knew that his wife was most worried about the last thing. Jingwan was silent. If there was a so-called beauty goo, there would naturally be an ugly goo. Speaking of which, the former was made up of young and beautiful women, but the latter was far less exaggerated. Jingwan suspected that Sun Yilin had a similar goo. It seemed that it was not as simple as making people ugly. Moreover, no matter what kind of goo it was, Jingwan was against it from the bottom of her heart. However, when some things were not used on one's own people, one had to admit that they were actually very useful and effective. Compared with her disgust, as expected, her husband could get things done more easily. That was why she had the upper hand. People were indeed selfish. Even if they were selfless, it was only relative. The only person who was truly selfless at any time and in any position was probably the sage. As for where those goo came from, if they knew where they came from, would they be afraid of not being able to get them? Moreover, Gong Jiu's current state was quite strange. Perhaps at some time, all the methods of raising goo would appear in his mind. Regardless of whether he wanted to raise them or not, as long as Li Hongyuan said a word, he would definitely do his best. Let's see how Fu Rong chooses. Jingwan said. She even specially looked at a certain someone. Was there a need to speak so harshly? For most women, chastity was important, but appearance was also important. It may be easier to rely on beauty to gain a foothold, but at the same time, it is also fragile. From other aspects, things may be more difficult, but once you succeed, your foothold will be more stable. Moreover, people in high positions never lack female confidants. It may be easier to not be a female confidant, but it may be easier to be a counselor behind a female confidant than to approach the master directly. There are many things that you don't need to inquire about personally. In this way, your own danger will also be reduced. At this moment, perhaps Jingwan needed to admit a fact. Those who treated Fu Rong as a chess piece actually unlocked some of her dangerous attributes, and whoever unlocked it would experience it. Jingwan was a little bit looking forward to the storm that Fu Rong would stir up in the future. You can leave. It won't be peaceful tonight. Eat something and refresh yourself. Since she didn't expose herself in front of her, she should treat her like Hei Mei. As the saying goes, prepare for a rainy day. Even if Fu Rong was a chess piece that couldn't be used for a while, she should pay attention to the details now and try to make it as seamless as possible. Yes, I will leave now. Fu Rong squatted and took 2 steps back. She seemed to have thought of something. Princess, I exchanged one of your prayer beads. Master Liaochen should know. The implication was that Fu Rong could rest assured. Otherwise, she could go back and ask Master Liaochen for confirmation. Jingwan didn't suspect anything. She wasn't that suspicious. She just glanced at a certain someone who was still calm. Gong Mama had been waiting at the door. When she knew that Fu Rong betrayed her, she was angry, but she was used to being cautious and stable, so she didn't show her emotions easily. At this point, her view of Fu Rong became a little complicated. It was the same as Jingwan's previous thought. It was a pity that Fu Rong was a maid. It was a good choice to send her to the former way. However, Gong Mama valued Jingwan very much. No matter what Fu Rong did, in Gong Mama's heart, she would never be able to clear her name. Of course, it was different from Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan looked at whether Fu Rong was trustworthy. She looked at the possibility that Fu Rong could continue to serve Jingwan. Fu Rong never denied what she did. She didn't feel guilty. So, no matter who she faced, she was frank. after Fu Rong walked away. Gong Zhou, if Fu Rong has any injuries, take some medicine and let He Mei help her apply it. Also, try to reduce the burden on Sun Yilin. Jing Wan said. Anyway, she didn't believe that these two people were really intact. Yes. Gong Zhou responded. He didn't even look at Li Hongyuan's expression. With the princess, the prince could only be the second. In order to recover her energy, Jing Wan also went to bed early. Even if she knew that the second half of the night might be very dangerous, because Li Hongyuan was there, she didn't worry. Therefore, it was easy for her to fall asleep. After falling asleep, she slept very soundly. When Jing Wan was woken up, Gong Mama, He Mei, and Fu Rong were all waiting on her side. All the things she needed to wash up were prepared. When she was completely dressed, Jing Wan was completely awake. At this moment, her clothes were very simple and neutral. There were no ornaments on her head or body. The only ornament was probably the Buddha beads on her wrist. However, in the end, Jing Wan still asked Gong Mama to tie the dagger to her arm. Although the sleeves were much narrower, it was still easy to roll up the sleeves. With me here, what does Wan need it for? Li Hongyuan was a little dissatisfied. He was injured, so he wouldn't use force easily. Moreover, he didn't feel at ease leaving Jingwan to others. Therefore, his most important task in the future was to protect his wife. I believe in you. This is just in case. Jingwan was worried about him. Sometimes, even if she knew that her ability was limited and she might even be more of a hindrance, she still wanted to protect her lover. Of course, Jingwan had learned self-defense in her previous life. When she went to the northwest, she learned it from Gong Mama. Because she had a good foundation, she was not as good as a well-trained person. Therefore, she definitely wouldn't be a hindrance. Li Hongyuan frowned, but he didn't say anything in the end. When everything was ready, Jingwan stood up and moved a little. When she lowered her head, she silently found that her belly seemed to be a lot bigger. She didn't know if it was because the clothes were more close-fitting, or because she didn't pay attention to her belly for a period of time. After careful calculation, it had been more than 5 months since she was pregnant on June 11th. She would be born in more than 4 months. Jingwan slowly exhaled, looked back at Li Hongyuan, and said with a smile, "Let's go." Li Hongyuan touched her face and leaned over to kiss her lips. Anyway, these 2 days, he kissed Jingwan without any scruples. Jingwan was used to it, and the people around her were also used to it. When they saw it, they just tilted their heads. Even the most innocent black girl didn't blush. There were not many torches outside, but they weren't few either. Basically, they were controlled to the extent that the enemy couldn't see clearly, and it wouldn't affect their progress. Jingwan saw Sun Yilin at a glance. Compared with the other people who were almost integrated into one, he was a little unique. He seemed to be in poor spirits, much worse than Fu Rong. It was enough to show that someone really took special care of him. However, compared with the way here, the treacherous aura on Sun Yilin's body was much weaker. Even if his face was still ugly, she didn't feel uncomfortable. Sun Yilin's abnormality could only be explored later. Although it was unforgivable, for the sake of Sun Yijia, Jingwan was still willing to find reasons and excuses for him. Sun Yilin's current position was hostile to Jingwan, so there was still a person who was watching him. However, this person couldn't be expected to do much. If necessary, he might directly kill Sun Yilin. After all, he was an enemy. If he couldn't take him away, he would kill him. Was it possible to let him go back? What a simple logic. Li Hongyuan was protecting Jingwan, and there were a few other people around them. There weren't many people, and it was similar to the formation on the side. If they were too tightly protected, it would only make them more conspicuous. At that time, they would become targets. In addition, Blackie and Fu Rong were walking together, and there were also people around them. In a sense, they were also Jingwan's substitutes. Jingwan was walking silently and attentively. The noise outside the valley gradually entered her ears. In fact, there were a lot of people, but it was still much weaker than the shouting on the battlefield. At some point, her footsteps quickened, and she was about to jog. And it seemed that because of the appearance of these people, the noise suddenly doubled, and she could even feel the pressure of the crowd suddenly surging up. When she was in the northwest, Jingwan was the closest, and she was also at the rear of the battlefield, so she didn't see the scene with her own eyes. Perhaps it wasn't as grand as that time, but the difference wasn't too far. Especially when she was close, she could hear the sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh and blood, and there was also an unusually obvious smell of blood, which made her faintly nauseous. Jingwan wasn't sure if she could bear it, so she kept her head down and followed Li Hongyuan closely. In fact, as a special personnel who needed to be protected, looking around was a big taboo. Jingwan wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Li Hongyuan didn't stop walking, and his direction was very clear. And from the beginning to the end, Jingwan didn't hear any voices nearby. Obviously, he and his subordinates had a way of communicating without words. Zhang Guo was determined to take Li Hongyuan's life, and all directions outside the call must have been blocked. However, because of the terrain and the arrangement of the other party's personnel, there were always relatively weak points. Li Hongyuan's subordinates must have figured these out clearly. Without communication, how could they be unwavering? Jingwan felt the stickiness under her feet. In the absence of rain and snow, it was obvious that it was soaked in blood. The light of the torch was limited. At some point, Jingwan stepped down and stepped on a soft but hard object, and she stumbled slightly. Jingwan's first reaction was that it was an arm. She had clearly killed someone before, and whether it was physical or psychological, she didn't have any reaction, but now, sure enough, whether it was killing someone or dying someone, she had to choose her target. Li Hongyuan hurriedly supported Jingwan. "Wan, I'm fine." She suppressed the discomfort in her heart. Li Hongyuan frowned in the darkness, but without another word, he carried Jingwan in his arms. Caught off guard, Jingwan's body leaned back a little, but her mouth was tightly shut. She wrapped her arms around his neck to prevent the nearest enemy from hearing. She lowered her voice and said, "Ah Yuan, put me down. This is too eye-catching." It might not be easy to see clearly if they were walking by themselves with the torch swaying. But if they were carrying someone, as long as the torch swayed slightly and someone saw them and shouted, they would be exposed. Wan, don't worry. Your husband will definitely bring you back safely." Li Hongyuan subconsciously kissed the corner of her eye again. In this wilderness, the road was rugged and uneven. For the average person, even in the daytime, it wouldn't be smooth to walk, let alone when they couldn't see clearly. If she followed them, it would indeed slow down the speed. Jingwan pursed her lips, hugged her hands tighter, and no longer spoke. In this way, she didn't have to concentrate on walking. She could see the situation nearby. The weapons on the periphery were clashing, and the middle was ready to strike at any time. Upon closer inspection, she found that they seemed to be blocking her figure, and the torch could only illuminate a small area. In this way, her worries seemed to be superfluous. Compared to the people of Zhang, who were shouting to kill, the people surrounding the husband and wife were very quiet. "Jin Qin Wang Fei is over here." It was unknown who shouted. But this direction was obviously a bit different from Jingwan's direction. The enemies in front were reduced by half in an instant. The pressure suddenly decreased, and the speed of the breakthrough was obviously faster. Because Jin Qinwang didn't want his Wang Fei to be hurt even if it was only a possibility, he would rather be controlled by others. This showed how important his Wang Fei was to him. In this case, even if the two separated and Jin Qin Wang Fei was in danger, it was impossible for Jin Qin Wang to be indifferent. And Zhangguo's plan was to keep an eye on the husband and wife while they were breaking out. It would be best if they could directly find Li Hongyuan. It should be known that before this, the people of Zhang who were responsible for intercepting and killing Li Hongyuan had set a high reward. They took Li Hongyuan's head, high official, generous salary, and beautiful women. Not a single thing would be lacking. For ordinary soldiers, this was a temptation. Just by killing one person, they could reach the sky in a single bound. Compared to struggling in other places for a lifetime and still being at the bottom, there was basically no need to think about what to choose. Therefore, the attraction of this sentence was absolutely strong. The people who were attracted didn't even hesitate. Jingwan's heart couldn't help but rise. She turned her head to look in the direction of the voice. Under the dim light of the fire, she could only see the crowd moving. More and more people were rushing over, and they were still fighting. It was enough to see that there were people of Zhang and also people of her own side. This time, the one who used her identity to lead the enemies away was either Fu Rong or He Mei, and the two were together. The two might have the intention to be her substitute, but there was no deliberate arrangement. Jingwan didn't know if they were accidentally discovered or deliberately. Her fists clenched tighter and tighter. If she could, she didn't want anything to happen to them. If she could, she hoped that all of them would be fine. But in this kind of situation, how could they not be injured or dead? Jingwan gritted her teeth. Her breathing became a little heavy, but she still didn't speak. She knew very well that only when the couple went out, they had a higher chance of surviving. If they were left behind, it meant that everyone would die here. Everyone around her was fighting for her, giving their all for her, and even dying for her. That kind of feeling was definitely not a good feeling. As long as one was not absolutely selfish and ruthless, it would be impossible for them to remain indifferent, let alone Jingwan. That kind of impact was definitely unprecedented. Li Hongyuan could understand Jingwan's current feelings. After all, he had tasted that kind of feeling in his previous life. Later, his heart became colder and colder. Although it wasn't completely indifferent, it was no longer enough to move him, let alone make him do something irrational. Chapter 575. Surprisingly calm, the speed of their feet became faster and faster, and the people around them were the same. When they almost completely broke out of the encirclement, the other side seemed to have discovered the truth. Jingwan heard some buzzing sounds, but she still heard someone roaring angrily. That person was probably the person in charge of Zhang country. Trash, trash, hurry up and chase after them. It was obvious that since the other side was fake, the real one must have taken advantage of this time to rush out. Judging from the swaying torches everywhere, there was more than one group of people who broke out. Who knew which direction Qi Yuan's Prince Jin was in? He spat and cursed, "You let him run away like this." He was very clear that if he couldn't kill Qi Yuan's Prince Jin, when he returned, his head would be moved. Trash, hurry up and chase after them. He kicked the person closest to him. He was angry not only because the other person ran away so easily, but also because he was so easily fooled and angry. He obviously knew that it could be a scam. No, how could he be fooled? It was obviously his group of subordinates who were eager for quick success and kept dispatching people. Li Hongyuan ordered some people to stay behind to stop the attack, and the rest to continue forward. The torches in their hands were directly extinguished. Without torches, the following path was naturally more difficult to walk. However, as long as it was not pitch black, after their eyes adjusted a little, they could basically see the vague outlines of nearby objects. Then, Jingwan realized that their speed did not slow down by much. As they walked further and further, the sound behind them became weaker and weaker until they could not hear it at all. It was quiet. In the winter, there were very few insect sounds. Suddenly, a ball of fire exploded in the sky. With the previous battlefield as the center, there was about a 90-degree angle with the direction they were at. Although she had never seen it before, Jingwan knew that it should be a signal flare. Gunpowder had long appeared in the history of Qi Yuan, and firecrackers had already been used. It was not surprising that there would be a signal flare. Jingwan watched it disappear completely and did not retract her gaze. Wan, don't worry. Our people are already trying their best to break out of the encirclement. Li Hongyuan said softly. Jingwan responded softly, her nasal voice was a little heavy. They were basically shadow guards, and their lethality was originally very high. Although there were many enemies, if they wanted to, they could always kill their way out. Previously, they had been fighting with the people of Zhang because their master had not left. Now that their master was safe, and Zhang had sent a large number of people to chase after Li Hongyuan, as long as they were still alive, it would not be difficult to escape. But they were not sure how many people would be left. Don't worry, Princess Consort. They're all elites under His Highness. It's not a problem for them to fight against 10 people. Gong Mama also spoke out to comfort her. Jingwan responded with a smile. However, that smile was extremely forced. The so-called 1 against 10 was probably under the situation of being defeated one by one. If they were besieged, how many people could do this? That was because they had a mortal body. They only had a pair of hands and 2 legs. They could block 1 or 2 sides, but how could they block 3 or 4 sides at the same time? Moreover, the Shadow Guard's attack power was indeed high, but they mostly walked the path of craftiness and focused on individual combat. Their battlefield had never been in such a situation. Jingwan was not stupid. Even if she had never encountered shadow guards, there were similar occupations in her previous life. She could always find out from some channels that she could use. As the saying goes, different roads lead to the same destination. In fact, there was no other way to mobilize so many shadow guards. There were not many guards in the Wang residence. Although Li Hongyuan also had the ability to mobilize troops, those people were not involved in the things he had done before. To mobilize them, at least, official channels were needed. Li Hongyuan was trapped. Although he could still barely communicate with the outside world, the people outside did not know his specific location. In this situation, he could only rely on shadow guards. Jingwan leaned on Li Hongyuan's shoulder. They did not want her to know, so she would just pretend that she did not know. However, Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's minds were connected and they could not understand each other better. Their bodies also had the most direct contact, so how could they not feel it? They were shadow guards. It was their honor to die for their master. Li Hongyuan could not say such words to Jingwan. Rest for a while. Gongzhou, take my pulse. Li Hongyuan opened his mouth and said. Jingwan heard this and did not care about anything else. Ah Yuan, did the wound split open? She asked anxiously as her hands gently touched the wound. Don't worry, it shouldn't split open. It just hurts a little. Li Hongyuan comforted her gently. It was so dark that she couldn't see anything. Jingwan could only quietly lean against a tree and watch the blurry figure moving. Gongzhou had practiced the skill of treating wounds in the dark. Just by feeling, he knew that Li Hongyuan's wound had split open a little and was bleeding a little. However, if it was any other time, he would not even frown, let alone cry out in pain. He would not reapply medicine until the matter was over. Not only Gongzhou knew, but the people around also knew that he did this to divert the princess's attention. In fact, it was very successful. If it was any other time, they would probably think that he was treacherous. He actually shamelessly used the trick of injuring himself to gain the princess's sympathy. However, it was special now. No one thought that he was wrong. They had more or less experienced their companions dying for one reason or another. It was only because of external reasons that their 7 emotions and 6 desires were weak. It wasn't that they didn't have any. When they faced it for the first time, especially when their companions died for them, that kind of feeling was really so painful that they wanted to die. The princess had not seen most of the shadow guards, but she had always cherished her life. So many people died, and it seemed to her that it was because of her. How could she feel good? It was best to divert her attention. Although she was still worried about the prince, she knew that the prince's life was not in danger. Naturally, her emotions would not be so heavy. She groped around and finished treating Li Hongyuan's wound. Your Highness, don't worry. The wound is bleeding very little. It won't have a big impact. That's good. Jingwan breathed a sigh of relief. Speaking of which, she was also worried that she did not notice Li Hongyuan's scheming. Since he said that he wanted to rest, he would definitely rest. However, the conditions did not allow it. Li Hongyuan was not so particular. Li Hongyuan casually leaned against a tree and sat down. He pulled Jingwan into his arms and whispered to her. In short, he wanted to divert her attention. He basically knew what the situation of this battle was. Originally, he chose to break out in the second half of the night, when people were most tired. In this way, it was not far from dawn now. Jingwan did not even walk a few steps. She was not tired, but her mind was tense. Moreover, pregnant women were easy to be tired. Li Hongyuan kept talking to her, which imperceptibly soothed her nerves. When she relaxed, she was a little sleepy. However, she was worried, so she could not sleep well. If she could sleep well, she would definitely recover a lot when she woke up. Li Hongyuan exhausted his patience and coaxed Jingwan to sleep in the end. By the time his voice had completely disappeared, the surroundings had quieted down once more. Li Hongyuan turned his head and stroked Jingwan's hair from time to time. No one knew what he was doing. Obviously, he did not intend to get up and leave. Although this place was not far from the call, he was not worried because of that. Some of the people who followed them were also closing their eyes to rest, and some were scattered around to keep watch. Granny Gong untied the bag tied on her back. There was only a cloak in it. Originally, it was a burden during the breakout, but Granny Gong insisted on carrying it in case of an emergency. Obviously, it came in handy. She took it out and put it on Jingwan. After this rest, when they got up again, the sky was already slightly bright. After confirming the direction, they continued on their way without waking up Jingwan. When Jingwan woke up naturally, the sky was already bright. She hurriedly asked Li Hongyuan to put her down. She did not know how long they had been walking, but no matter how good her husband's physical strength and arm strength were, he was still injured. Moreover, no matter how capable he was not a machine. After a long time, lighter things would become heavier, and Jingwan's weight was not light. Coincidentally, there was a small stream in front of them. They also needed to eat something to maintain their strength. After all, it was not completely safe now. For the shadow guards, there was no need to worry about food in the wilderness. Even if it was winter, they would quickly bring back something that could be eaten out of the forest. The only problem was probably the taste. They were used to it. It was fine as long as there was something to eat. However, when the food was about to be handed to the two masters, they realized belatedly that it was very embarrassing. Li Hongyuan looked at it with disdain. Jingwan accepted it in a good mood and even glared at a certain someone. After putting it in her mouth, it did not seem that bad. The specific location could not be confirmed, but it was generally clear. The people of Zhang did not want Li Hongyuan to return to the capital of Qiyuan. For this reason, they did not hesitate to cut off the path where the garrison was, followed by the official road, and then the nearest village. In this way, their manpower would definitely be scattered. However, as long as they blocked the nearest path, there would still be a considerable number of people on each path. At least, it was far more than Jingwan's current manpower. Moreover, it was easier to be discovered in broad daylight. Therefore, the safer way was to bypass these places. In this way, they would have to cross the mountains and ridges on foot. This was not an easy task. If Jingwan was not pregnant, this trip could be regarded as a hiking trip. Anyway, Jingwan's physical strength was very good, so it was not a problem at all. Therefore, after thinking about it, Li Hongyuan decided to stay in place and move around. If they were careful, they would not be in danger of being exposed. Of course, unless they were extremely unlucky. If they did not see them for a long time, Li Hongyuan's people would eventually find them. At that time, his side would have the advantage. In the territory of Qiyuan, no matter how arrogant the people of Zhang were, there must be a limit. If they dragged on for a long time, they would only be at a disadvantage. Therefore, as long as there was no problem with Jingwan's body, Li Hongyuan was not in a hurry. At most, it would only take 2 or 3 days. You will have to suffer. Li Hongyuan said to Jingwan. Suffer? Not really. In fact, this feeling is quite novel. In her previous life, this kind of activity was very popular. Jingwan had participated in it once or twice. Of course, it was actually quite tiring occasionally. But it was different now. Everything was taken care of. It was just that it was inconvenient to wash up, and there was no change of clothes. Originally, not to mention 2 or 3 days, even if it was a longer time without changing clothes, Jingwan had also experienced it in her previous life. Any discomfort could be forced to adapt. However, in this life, Jingwan was born into a good family. It was not a top-notch wealthy family. Her food and clothing were carefully taken care of. It was not that she did not change clothes for a few days, but she changed a few sets of clothes a day. For more than 10 years, it was like this. Especially in Jin Wangfu, it was even more meticulous. Now, she always felt that her body was a bit itchy. Things like habits, even if you were forced to change, it was not something that could be changed in a short time. However, when there was nothing to do, she would nestle in someone's arms and let him tickle her. It felt quite comfortable. Jingwan was comfortable, but Li Hongyuan was a bit tormented. Originally, when Jingwan was pregnant, he did not have many opportunities to eat meat. This time, he had not eaten for a long time. Touching his wife's smooth and delicate skin, how could he not have any reaction? However, he still did not have the right time, right place, and right people. At most, he could kiss twice to satisfy his craving. On the 3rd day of staying in the same place, a shadow guard came to report that there was a group of dozens of people coming in their direction. From their attire, they looked like ordinary villagers. Including the things in their hands, they were all used by farmers. However, thinking about it, one would know how careless this disguise was. In this large piece of land, there were actually very few people. The nearest village was a few li away, and there were very few residents in the village. For dozens of young and strong men to appear out of nowhere, who would believe that there was nothing fishy? Even if it was the bandits of any mountain, it was impossible for them to be so orderly. These people, they really don't give up. Jingwan said coldly. It's just a deathbed struggle. Naturally, they want to come out and try their luck instead of continuing to guard a few roads and wait for rabbits. Are they sure that I'm a hindrance and can't go far? Even if Jingwan herself was very self-aware, if she was treated like this by her own people, it would be fine. However, it was unpleasant to be treated like this by those enemies. This is also the truth. Wan, don't bother about it. Li Hongyuan was still in the mood to tease her. Jingwan gently rolled her eyes at him. It's just that, are we unlucky, or are they too lucky? Who knows? Let's go. Li Hongyuan directly carried Jingwan up, and his footsteps were not slow at all. While they were talking, the others quickly packed up the things that should be packed and quickly followed. Although there were some traces that they did not have time to deal with, it did not matter. There were several places where there were traces, and they were deliberately left. Following the traces, they would only be going in circles. As for other places, it was impossible to find them unless they were very careful and professional. Moreover, they had already figured out the surroundings, where they could hide, where they could have a good line of sight, and where they could not be found. It was easy to take them for a walk. However, it did not take long for them to find a problem. This group of people was not fooled because they actually had a hunting dog with them. The traces that they had just left were very fresh, and it was easy for the hunting dog to find them. Everyone's expression became serious. They went in circles and took the initiative to leave when they did not find them. Obviously, it was not going to work. If they did not want to tire themselves out, they could only get rid of the hunting dog. In this way, they would be completely bitten. In that case, let's kill them all. Li Hongyuan said lightly, but the content of his words was unusually cruel. However, no one thought that he was boasting. If they did not face it head-on, there were ways to not face it. Once they faced it, there were also ways to face it. They had already thought of a way, and naturally, they had thought of a way. Without hesitation, they went straight to the place that they had prepared beforehand. On the ground, it was dangerous and narrow. It was a good place where one man can hold the pass against 10,000. However, although it was a good place, it could also be considered a dangerous place because there was only one way in and out. When they chose to go in and the outside road was left to the enemy, they had no other way to go except for victory. It was as if the back was against the cliff, and the feet were on the clouds. The place was not big, and there were vines hanging at the entrance. When they found this place, Jingwan was also there, but she did not go in to take a look. Now that she was there, it was really a little scary. However, Jingwan leaned on the innermost seat and looked around. The bows and arrows were made at the last minute. They were originally equipped with crossbows, but there were not many arrows left. Otherwise, they would not have needed these 0-hour bows. Although they only had a little more than 10 people, and the number of the enemy was more than 5 to 6 times, Jingwan, who had no experience in this kind of situation, was not afraid at all. As long as they controlled it well, the possibility of annihilating the enemy and their side would be very high. The only problem was that they did not know if these people went back to find help, and the location and number of helpers were unknown. Therefore, they needed to end the battle quickly. Hurry, they are in front. The person who said this was quite excited and took the lead. A high position and a beautiful woman was in front of him, and she was waving at him. How could he not be excited? Not to mention that they might not be the target. First, there was no one around, and no one would easily move around in this area. Second, if they did not have a guilty conscience, why would they avoid them from afar? Therefore, they were very confident. Standing behind the vines, through the gaps, they saw everything. The 5 crossbows were already set up, and they only needed to wait for these people to come closer. In just one round, at least 20 people would be killed. However, in the end, they were not blinded by the imminent victory. When they came closer, they did not see anything. If the hounds were not barking at a cluster of vines, they might have missed it. Therefore, they became cautious and stood up, using the nearby trees or stones as cover, and hid. However, Li Hongyuan's people were not lacking in patience. When the other side appeared one after another, they were still calm and waited, waiting for more people to come closer. The battle last night was fierce enough, and Jingwan did not see it, but heard more. Now, perhaps it was not fierce, but seeing those people getting closer and closer, she could not help but hold her breath, and her palms began to sweat. She was not afraid, but nervous enough. Li Hongyuan stood beside Jingwan, and his expression was natural and relaxed, showing that he had a card up his sleeve. Li Hongyuan kissed Jingwan's forehead, but Jingwan did not seem to feel it, and stared outside without blinking. Li Hongyuan suddenly felt a little funny, but also a little unhappy. He pinched Jingwan's chin, and with a little force, turned her around, and then kissed her hard. Jingwan also did not expect that this bastard would still play this trick in such a situation, and she was so angry that she hit him with all her strength. With this ruckus, the tense atmosphere was gone. Originally, they could not hear any sound from the outside, but now they heard some movement. Startled, they first dodged, and waited for a while, but still did not see any movement. They thought in their hearts that they should not have weapons like bows and arrows, and then they thought about what if there was a way out. Maybe they had already run far away, and they could not let the duck in their mouth fly away. No longer hesitating, they aggressively pounced. Shio, after the first arrow flew out, the second and third arrows flew out one after another. The arrows of the hand crossbows were relatively short, but the lethality was great. Moreover, the arrows were close to the body, and occasionally one or two arrows would fly out, directly piercing through two people. The control was precise, and there were no missed shots. Therefore, after this round, the harvest was more than expected. And these people of Zhang people were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, and those at the back hurriedly retreated, afraid that if they were a step slower, they would be unlucky. The hand crossbows were put away. The bows that were made temporarily were not so accurate, and because the arrows were wooden, the lethality was also much weaker. However, they were still calm and unhurried. They pulled the bow, aimed, and released. The final result was at least 70%. These 50 to 60 people fell one by one, and if they were not dead, they were injured. It was so tragic, but in the end, they did not even see the shadow of the target. Even if they had been warned before that this Jin Qinhuang of Qiyuan was not a small matter and was very difficult to deal with, they must be careful. However, when they really faced him, it was terrifying. There were less than 10 people who could still stand, and all their courage turned into nothingness. What high position, generous salary, and beautiful women, they had to be alive to enjoy them. And now, the situation was that even if they had to pay with their lives, if they wanted to give this merit to their family, they had to be able to kill the target first. The problem was that if they went up now, they would only be sending themselves to death. Run, in order to save their lives, they had to run quickly. Except for Li Hongyuan, Jingwan, Gong Mama, and Gong Zhou, the rest came out from behind the vines. 2 were left behind to deal the finishing blow, and the rest quickly rushed out to chase after the few people who were running away. In the forest, because the people who were running away were scared out of their wits, and because they were not used to such an environment, they stumbled, rolled, and crawled. The people who were chasing after them were running on flat ground and chose the shortest path to advance. In this way, even if the people behind were fewer than the people in front, the people in front were killed one by one. From the beginning to the end, it took a very short time. After coming out from behind the vines, Jingwan looked at the scattered corpses. Her heart was beating a little faster, but it was better than expected. Let's go. Li Hongyuan put his arm around Jingwan. They did not know if there would be more people chasing after them, so they should not stay here for long. Chapter 576. There was no need to clean up this place. In any case, there was no need to worry about an epidemic in this location. Moreover, when the matter was settled, there would always be someone to deal with it. Even if Li Hongyuan was extremely unlucky and lost his life in the end, the people of Zhang would definitely come to clean up the mess. After all, the traces of their activities in the Qi Yuan were too obvious. If they did not clean up the mess and angered the Qi Yuan, it would be a disaster for them. However, it was obvious that if Li Hongyuan fell so easily, he would not be Li Hongyuan. As for whether there would be more hounds behind them, it was hard to say. However, even if there was nothing to be afraid of. There were only so many people from Zhang. Previously, at least half of them had died outside the kernel. Now, they had to spread out and guard each road. In order to be absolutely successful, there would definitely be no less than 20 people. As a result, the number of people that could be deployed to search the mountain was very limited. There were already 50 to 60 people here. How many people would be left? Therefore, Li Hongyuan thought very clearly. As long as he was careful, the final result would be his victory. It was only a matter of time. If Jingwan was not by his side, he would have already turned the tables and directly went to find them. First, he had to ensure that Jingwan was absolutely safe. Only then could he retreat now. However, no one else appeared even after an hour had passed, so there shouldn't be anyone else coming. Li Hongyuan slightly narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the foot of the mountain. Under normal circumstances, even if no one went back and did not report, it was still dozens of people. As the person in charge, it was impossible to be indifferent. At the same time, he should have thought that it was very likely that they had met Prince Jin of the Qi Yuan. Li Hongyuan's approximate location was clearly written. There was no reason for him to ignore it. Could it be that they knew that it was impossible to complete, so they gave up? Jingwan guessed. The possibility is very low. After coming out of the call, as long as one of my people went out, it means that Zhang's matter has been exposed. Even if the identity of the shadow guards is sensitive, and they did not find the local garrison for the time being, sooner or later they will find those who are loyal to me in the court. If they wanted to give up, they should have done so at the first moment. Besides, the one who really wants me dead is Southern Qi. Zhang is at most a pawn. If Zhang is exposed and cannot complete the mission, then Southern Qi will attack Zhang before Qi Yuan does. On the other hand, if Zhang completes the mission, even if Qi Yuan's revenge, Southern Qi can still ask Southern Qi for help. So, if they kill Zhang, there is still a chance of survival. If they don't kill me, then there is only one path left. Li Hongyuan was such a dangerous person. He could not be used by Southern Qi, so he had to find a way to destroy him. In any case, Southern Qi's national strength was not inferior to Qi Yuan's. Even if they killed a prince of Qi Yuan, they would not be afraid. Getting rid of Li Hongyuan would reduce the danger. So, in fact, one could imagine the threat that Southern Qi posed to Zhang. So, not only would they not give up, but they would also become crazier at this time. The real situation was completely different from what they had expected. It made people wonder if there was something fishy going on. Uncontrollable things were what people hated the most. Li Hongyuan sent someone out to investigate the specific situation. They did not make any moves for the time being, but they would not stay in place and wait. That secret guard had been gone for nearly 4 hours, which was much longer than expected. However, he came back with good news. It turned out that the person in charge of the state of Zhang knew that it was impossible to complete the mission, but he didn't want to die. Therefore, while he arranged for his subordinates to continue searching for Li Hongyuan's whereabouts, he secretly slipped away and prepared to sneak back to the state of Zhang quietly. Before the news of the failure spread, he would take his family away. After leaving the state of Zhang, there would be a place for his family to settle down. Therefore, Li Hongyuan's previous plan was flawless, but he still missed a person's heart. He probably didn't expect that the person carefully selected by the state of Zhang to carry out the mission would be a coward when faced with a problem. He didn't care about the national interest at all. It was just that this person's luck was not very good. Because he was in a hurry to return to Zhang, he did not follow the original route of smuggling back. Instead, he took the official road. It must be known that there were troops stationed at the border. Unlucky people would not know how to arouse suspicion. With a little interrogation, they would be exposed. So, how could they return? Although the number of troops stationed was not many, when they knew that Jin Qinhuang was in danger near them, how could they ignore it? So they immediately sent people to clean up the people of Zhang. And the person in charge of Zhang ran away by himself. The people left behind did not know anything about it. So, they were all caught without knowing. The situation was reversed like this. To be honest, the appearance of a pig opponent, no matter who it was, they would be very happy. Including Li Hongyuan, his expression was slightly relaxed. He looked at Jingwan. He did not care. The main thing was Jingwan. The earlier the matter was over, the earlier Jingwan could relax. This kind of environment was harmful to her. Now that the matter was resolved, there was no need to hide anymore. They went down the mountain openly. During this period, she learned from the shadow guards that because the troops stationed at the border were cleaning up Zhang, some of Li Hongyuan's scattered subordinates had gathered. Among them were He Mei and Fu Rong. Both of them were injured. Fu Rong was more seriously injured. Because on the night of the breakout, she pretended to be Jingwan. In fact, she was the one who proposed the strategy of luring the enemy. Fortunately, she did not suffer a fatal injury. She also did not lose all her limbs. If she slowly recuperated, there would be a day when she recovered. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Fu Rong was a rare person who valued friendship and righteousness. If she grew up in a normal environment, she should also be a woman of peerless beauty. Qi Yuan's troops were close at hand. There were at least 300 people. However, this number would only make people feel at ease. What is the name of this garrison? Li Hongyuan asked casually. Although there were only a few thousand troops stationed here, the highest-ranking officer was still a garrison, a fourth-grade official. The shadow guard said a name. And it was this name that made Li Hongyuan stop. The expression on his face was slightly serious. As soon as he stopped, the others stopped as well. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with this person? This person was right in front of them. If there was really something wrong with this person, then... Jingwan's nerves instantly tensed up again. Li Hongyuan held her hand and was silent for a moment. He wanted to smooth things over, but there were some things that it was better to be mentally prepared in advance. And maybe he was just thinking too much. Did you see Sun Yilan before? Li Hongyuan asked. Replying to Master, I saw him. He also suffered some injuries and his consciousness is not very clear. At the mention of Sun Yilan, Jingwan suddenly understood why her husband asked this. It was because this garrison's surname was Sun, and the word in the middle of his name seemed to be the same as the current Duke Ding's. Although it was not a coincidence, it was very likely that he was a member of the Sun family. The Sun family was led by the Duke Ding's family. This position was too delicate. Moreover, Sun Yilan wanted Li Hongyuan to die. Ah Yuan, you should have known about the Sun family, especially those in the officialdom. He had forgotten about this garrison's son, and the shadow guard beside him should not have forgotten about it. Yes, I have. There is no such person. Jingwan heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it should be just a coincidence. However, when she saw Li Hongyuan's expression, she swallowed the remaining half of her sigh. What's wrong? The minister of the Ministry of Rights is also surnamed Su. The implication was that Li Hongyuan already had doubts in his heart. It was as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat. Sun Yilin, you should have killed him directly. You should have killed him directly. Jingwan really regretted and blamed herself. She should not have completely reduced him to a prisoner and could not cause any trouble. It was impossible for him to pose a threat to her husband. Also, because of Sun Yijia's compassion, she only thought that no matter how he was punished, it would be enough to keep him alive. Li Hongyuan was the one who disliked Sun Yilin the most. However, when he saw Jingwan's current state, he completely forgot about Sun Yilin. In particular, when he saw that there was a trace of blood on Jingwan's lips, he did not know where she had bitten. His thumb brushed across her lips. Wan, everything is just speculation. However, if this speculation was true, then they already had no way to escape. Everything that had happened before, at this time, was actually just a small matter. The hundreds of people who had originally made them feel at ease had now become their prison, making it impossible for them to escape even if they had wings. Wan, you don't need to blame yourself. Li Hongyuan said softly. In the blink of an eye, he had already sorted out all the clues. As a member of the Sun family, they would certainly support Prince Kong. As long as they knew the danger of Li Hongyuan, they would think of a way to get rid of him at the first opportunity. Their thoughts were even stronger than those of the Southern Qi people. Sun Yilin didn't even need to do anything. He didn't need to reveal his identity. He only needed to let this guard know the tip of Li Hongyuan's iceberg. That was enough. He didn't even need to give any evidence. The people of Zhang wanting to kill him was the best evidence. He didn't need to give this move now. He only needed to give a vague hint before Li Hongyuan left the capital. Li Hongyuan explained in detail. So, it doesn't matter if Sun Yilin is still alive or not. Speaking to this point, he suddenly laughed lightly. Previously, he had felt that he had overestimated Sun Yilin. He really hadn't played any role in this matter. Perhaps he had only formed a relationship with the Southern Qi Kingdom at the beginning and given them a little hint. However, it turned out that his true killing move was not in the Southern Qi Kingdom. Rather than saying that he had thrown himself into the Southern Qi Kingdom, it was better to say that he had used the Southern Qi Kingdom. This plan was actually very simple. However, no matter what the process was, it was not very difficult to reach this point. Perhaps everything was within Sun Yilin's expectations. As long as I leave the capital and come here, it doesn't matter if he participated or not. Even if he dies, the plan can still proceed. Li Hongyuan thought to himself that it was no wonder he was the youngest Grand Secretary to be promoted from First Minister in his previous life. Because of his different experiences, he had grown faster than in his previous life. If it weren't for his relationship with Wan, he would still be willing to continue using such a talented person. However, there was no if in everything. Looking at the hundreds of Qi Yuan soldiers coming closer and closer, they were all dressed in the same uniform, with shining weapons and bows in their hands. They were moving faster and faster, and even the bows on their backs had been taken off. No matter how one looked at it, they did not have good intentions. Ah, Yuan, hurry up and leave. You are their real target. As long as you can escape. Jingwan anxiously pushed him away. Wan, Li Hongyuan softly interrupted her. I won't leave even if I can. Wherever you are is where my heart belongs. You have to know that as long as you are in their hands, I will definitely walk into their trap. Moreover, if they use you to threaten me, then I will do anything for them before I can save you. Jingwan's eyes instantly reddened, and her teeth chattered. If it weren't for me, if it weren't for me, if it weren't for you, there would be no meaning in restarting my life. Wan, you should blame me. I am the one who dragged you into this. However, even if it were 100 or 1,000 times over, I would still do it. So, don't say such things. Your husband will be sad. Li Hongyuan's fingertips brushed past Jingwan's eyes. As long as I have you, I can accept any failure. So, Wan, will you die with me? Okay. Jingwan said without hesitation. Her only regret was that she would not be able to accompany them after the baby was born. However, it did not matter. Jingwan believed that they would still be a family in their next life. After making preparations, Jingwan was no longer so nervous. Looking at the Qi Yuan soldiers who had not yet come close, there was nothing to say. Her guess was the truth. Li Hongyuan and the others were surrounded. Although they had all heard Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's words, they still dutifully protected them. They held their weapons and faced outwards, showing a defensive posture. Even if they were faced with hundreds of arrows, they were still too weak. Guard Sun walked out. He looked like a decent person. It seemed that he really had not done any evil deeds. However, people nowadays were too good at pretending. The so-called one's appearance comes from one's heart was not so reliable. As the saying goes, one may know a person's face but not his heart. Guard Sun stared at Li Hongyuan for a moment and suddenly cupped his hands. This subject greets your highness. Duke Dinghua, there is no such person within the 5 servers. Which branch of the Sun clan do you belong to? Li Hongyuan asked faintly. Hearing your highness say this, it seems that you have a good understanding of the Sun clan. Under normal circumstances, even if it was a prince who held great power, he would not go to such a detailed understanding, right? After all, it was no longer the time when the aristocratic families ruled the world. Who would still study the genealogy? Oh. And those who would do this kind of thing would definitely not be purely interested. Jin Qin Wang is useless, who said this? Guard Sun's face was full of emotion. As for his own birth, it was the one he did not want to mention the most. Because it was a stain that could not be washed away, causing him to be holed up in a barren mountain for the rest of his life. Other than muddling along, there was still muddling along. But he did not expect that the heavens would actually give him such an opportunity. There are quite a lot of people who said this. At least half of the Sun clan said this. The remaining half must have thought about it. Guard Sun's face twisted. This was ridiculing their entire clan for having eyes but failing to see. But then he sneered, so what? Jin Qin Wang has been dormant and deceiving the world, but he will die in this wilderness. Even his corpse will not be left behind. Since you are from a prestigious family, why don't you know how to leave some leeway when speaking? No matter whether the target is dead or not, you should not leave behind anything to talk about. Your Highness has good willpower, but thinking about it, if you don't have this willpower, how can you hide from the world for so long? Just before this official arrived, I reckon that your Highness had already realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, it was still a bit late. Otherwise, your Highness probably would not be standing here, but would be running for his life like a stray dog. However, even so, it is not just a matter of living a few more hours. The final result will be the same. In the capital, the other princes all see your Highness as a threat and want to get rid of you quickly. In reality, you are indeed a big threat. It is not as simple as being favored by the Emperor. If I send your Highness's head back to the capital to Prince Kong, even if you don't reach the heavens in one step, at least you will have a meteoric rise. Jingwan frowned. Even if her own husband was now a fish on the chopping block, he was not someone that anyone could humiliate. However, Jingwan did not open her mouth. Even if she was prepared to die, she would not give up easily until the last moment. Li Hongyuan's expression did not change. He even nodded as if it was a matter of fact. Your thinking is quite good. Thinking. That is the truth. Get ready, Wait a moment, Li Hongyuan raised his hand. Where is Sun Yilin? He should want to see Ben Wang die with his own eyes. Where is he? Did he not come along? Jingwan tilted her head slightly to look at Li Hongyuan. Her own husband seemed a little strange. At this time, he was still thinking about his love rival. Wasn't it a little, does your highness want to see me? A voice that sounded like a broken gong sounded from behind the soldiers on the road. The soldiers moved aside to let a man in black slowly walk up. Halfway through, he clenched his hand into a fist and coughed a few times. He was different from what Jingwan had seen before. He was wearing a large hood that almost covered his eyes. When he lowered his head, his face could not be seen. When he raised his head, there was a mask on his face. He was very calm before, but now he was covering it up. Jingwan glanced at Guard Sunday. In order to cooperate well, it was normal to cover it up. I really want to see your highness die. At this time, if I don't say something, I will feel very uncomfortable. After realizing that your highness is not simple, I know that it is not easy to deal with your highness. I can only overestimate you. After all, you have the ability to deceive the world. If I underestimate you, I am afraid that I will die without a burial place. Therefore, I must not act blindly without thinking. I must be patient and wait quietly. I also need a careful plan to win in one strike. Don't look at how happy Ruan Fangfei and the others were before. I didn't think that they would succeed at all. The truth is as I expected. However, to reach this point, in my opinion, it is not as difficult as I expected. Sun Yilin and Li Hongyuan looked at each other. His eyes were covered by the hood, dark and frightening. In the end, I still won. Is that so? You are not sure? Li Hongyuan asked faintly. Sun Yilin's gaze shifted slightly and landed on Jingwan. Wan, come with me, okay? What I said before is still valid. It's broad daylight, don't dream. Quickly wake up. Jingwan said expressionlessly. Sun Yilin knew that if Jingwan had any emotional reaction to him before, there would be nothing left now. He won. Did he really win? His own fate seemed to have changed from liking her. Because he liked her, she was the one that Jin Qinwang had long set his eyes on, so she was ruthlessly suppressed and then pushed to a dead end step by step. Could he blame her? In fact, Sun Yilin knew that he should not blame her. She was not wrong. However, sometimes, a person's emotions were not so easy to control. Therefore, Sun Yilin admitted that when he was ruthlessly tortured and driven mad, he blamed her. The more it was like this, the deeper his obsession, the more he wanted to get. If she is the object of competition, it seems that I really can't win against you. Sun Yilin saw clearly that she would really follow him from the blue sky to the yellow springs. It really makes people jealous. Wan is not an object. You treat her as an object and fight for it. Sun Yilin, now I am very suspicious. Do you really like her? Li Hongyuan frowned and looked at Sun Yilin, as if he was re-evaluating her. Sun Yilin was startled. He liked the Luo family's third young lady. This point, he had always believed. Wait, Luo family's third young lady. Young Master Yilin, why are you still talking nonsense with them? If you really like this Jin Qinwang Fei, just kill the others and snatch her. Guard's son said this, but his eyes flashed with ridicule. The dignified Dingguo Gong Fu's legitimate son, how honorable was he? He actually kept thinking about a married woman. Yes, this kind of person, no matter how capable he was, there was a limit. However, Sun Yilin did not pay attention to him. Guard Sun's face was somewhat green. He raised his hand. Get ready, who allowed you to make decisions without permission? Sun Yilin looked over. Guard Sun's face stiffened, his eyes somewhat unfocused, and then he ordered to put down the arrows. Puppet goo. Gong Jiu whispered softly. The nearby people all stopped in their ears. Just by hearing the name, they knew what it was used for. In a flash, Jingwan thought, could it be that Sun Yilin also wanted to use this kind of goo on her? Wan, you really don't want to consider it. If you agree, I can even give Jin Qinwang a way out. Whether he liked it or not, he did not want to pursue it. A way out is the same as living a life worse than death. Jingwan sneered. That's still living. Isn't living good? Just like you, like a rat living in the dark. You used to be the capital's #1 young master, do you think you are very good now? Jingwan ridiculed. In the end, he was once a proud son of heaven. Jingwan's words pierced his heart until it was dripping with blood. Okay? Not at all. Since that's the case, then there's nothing to say. In any case, I can't get your heart. It's enough that your body is left behind. Sun Yilin turned around, send them on their way. Although they were already mentally prepared, but when it came to the end, facing hundreds of fully drawn arrows, thinking that they would be pierced into a sieve, they still couldn't help but feel some fear. However, none of them closed their eyes. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's hand, and Jingwan also tightly held onto him. Li Hongyuan squeezed her fingers. Wan, don't be afraid. His eyes were serene as he said a few words that Jingwan didn't understand. Chapter 577. When the arrows flew towards them, Li Hongyuan brought Jingwan to one side. The rest of them, including Granny Gong, instantly tore off their outerwear. They spun in the air, shook their bodies, and caught most of the arrows. As for the rest, they cleverly dodged them. In addition, the speed at which the soldiers released their arrows was different, so there were not many arrows in the first round. However, the arrows that dodged the arrows continued flying towards their companions on the opposite side. They were not far away from the surrounding soldiers. The soldiers probably did not expect such an outcome. Some of them could not react in time. The situation became chaotic in an instant. Naturally, their bows and arrows were useless. By the time they fought back with their weapons, several lives had already been taken. And their counterattack wasn't that satisfactory. In fact, as Li Hongyuan expected, there was basically no conflict with Zhonggua. The garrison here looked neat, but it was just for show. When faced with a real life and death situation, not to mention an effective attack, there weren't many who had the courage to take the initiative to attack these ferocious shadow guards. Jingwan was not afraid of any poison. Moreover, Li Hongyuan was always with her. Gong Jiu did not have so many scruples. He used the poison in his body as if it was free. Of course, because the holy item of the barbarians had a range of 10 feet, in order to ensure the effect, he stayed 10 feet away from Jingwan and the others. The others tried their best to stay within 10 feet of Jingwan. However, to avoid accidentally hurting their own people, the soldiers within 10 feet of Jingwan were also protected. They could only rely on their own secret guards to deal with them. At the same time, Li Hongyuan, who had not done much before, also started a massacre at this moment. However, because he had to protect Jingwan at all times, his movements were greatly hindered, and his lethality was reduced. If Jingwan was not pregnant, he could still tie Jingwan on his back. Now, he could not. However, for Li Hongyuan, it was not a big problem. He just did not need to make big movements. His movements were small. He held the knife in his hand and slashed it down, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Jingwan saw this. Her heart was beating very fast, but she did not panic. She originally thought that she would definitely die, but the situation was reversed once again. If she could survive, it would be the best thing. She stayed close to Li Hongyuan and coordinated with his movements from time to time. She also held the dagger tightly in her hand. When needed, she was ready to attack at any time. Although the enemy outnumbered them and they did not have much chance of winning, no one would give up and no one thought too much. As the blood on her body increased, the color of her dress changed. There was also a lot of blood on her face and hands. The smell of blood was unusually clear. Jingwan became calmer and calmer. During this period, she attacked Li Hongyuan twice from behind and retreated after one attack. It was enough to let the enemy see blood because Gong Jiu had applied poison on the dagger 2 days ago. It caused a wound directly, which was more effective than Gong Jiu scattering it. The second and third lives disappeared from Jingwan's hands, but it did not make her heart waver again. Li Hongyuan saw this. After he found that Jingwan was very cautious and did not act rashly, he let her do what she wanted. In his eyes, Jingwan was also changing rapidly. She was more and more like the person in his previous life. Sure enough, even if the external environment was different, she was still the same in her bones. It was a chaotic battle. However, even if the enemy outnumbered them, there was a disadvantage because these people could not all swarm up. Unknowingly, Sun Yilin had already retreated outside. In fact, this situation was also out of his expectations. After all, there were some things that he had never seen before. He did not know that these soldiers were so useless. There were more than 300 of them, but they were still defeated by a dozen people. If all the soldiers in Qi Yuan's army were like this, then they did not need to do anything. They could just open the door and let the enemy in. It was clearly a sure-win situation, but he didn't feel anything in his heart. Perhaps it was because he understood Li Hongyuan better. In his opinion, it wasn't strange for Li Hongyuan to be able to turn any dangerous situation around. However, he was still not too worried. With 30 times the number advantage, they would be able to bury the other side alive. Although they looked fierce, they were already beginning to get injured. People, when faced with death, would also erupt with endless potential. Go, all of you, go. They only have so few people. Kill them, and everyone will be rewarded. If they don't die, you will be the ones to die. Guard Sun's encouragement obviously had a great effect. Sun Yilin's gaze was always on Jingwan. He had never seen her like this before. Even if she was injured, she was still brave, determined, and agile. She cooperated well with Li Hongyuan. As a result, Li Hongyuan's movements became smoother and smoother. There was really no room for others to interfere. Sun Yilin seemed to be entranced. He suddenly looked away and lowered his head. His body was trembling. However, no one could see the expression on his face. Sun Yilin did not know why. Suddenly, he raised his head again. His body stopped trembling. He turned his head and looked in the direction where they came from. There seemed to be some movement. Sun Yilin looked at the chaotic scene and prepared to go through the forest to see the situation. Now was not the time for accidents. However, Sun Yilin stopped halfway. There was no need to look. With such obvious sounds of horse hooves, there was definitely a large number of them. Moreover, to be able to ride horses in such a place, their speed was not slow. It would be strange if there were only 1 or 2 people, but with so many people, it would be strange if they were ordinary people. The safest way was to leave immediately. No matter who came, it had nothing to do with him. However, Sun Yilin did not think so. If he had to hide his head and show his tail for the rest of his life, it was definitely not a life he wanted. In fact, he had never thought about what the future would be like. A person like him probably did not have a so-called future. He used the puppet goo to control Guard Sun and made him cooperate with him. Sometimes, he had to take risks. Sun Yilin picked up a bow from the ground and pulled out an arrow from a person nearby. He was a young master of an aristocratic family. A gentleman's 6 arts were indispensable. In fact, Sun Yilin's archery had always been good. However, he did not need this to add flowers to his brocade. Thus, he only practiced in private. Not many people knew about it. He aimed. His target was Jingwan and Li Hongyuan. There was no specific target. Anyway, it was their position. It did not matter whether he shot or not. Anyway, his goal was not to hurt them. With a swoosh, Li Hongyuan and Jingwan discovered it almost at the same time. Jingwan saw it, while Li Hongyuan relied on his hearing. Without thinking, Jingwan blocked in front of Li Hongyuan. However, Jingwan did something wrong this time. Because this arrow was not a threat to Li Hongyuan at all. It was not difficult to block it. Jingwan's block hindered him from taking action. It was already too late to do anything. Li Hongyuan pushed away after speaking and then turned sideways, perfectly avoiding the arrow. However, things were not over yet. Jingwan was also caught off guard when she was pushed away. She rushed forward 2 steps and was concerned about Li Hongyuan's situation. She hurriedly turned around and did not pay attention to the situation in front of her. At this moment, a hand clasped her neck and a short blade was placed on her neck at the same time. Jingwan steadied herself by leaning against the person holding her hostage. She pursed her lips and looked at Li Hongyuan, who had completely stopped. She did not say anything. Stop. Li Hongyuan did not step forward. He ordered coldly. His men also obeyed his orders. In fact, because they were relatively close to each other, even if they didn't notice what happened at first, they could still see it clearly now. One of them was even just a little more than a centimeter away from Jingwan. However, when guard Sun snuck in, he had already seen it clearly and quickly retreated with Jingwan. The drop of blood on Jingwan's neck was enough to prove that if anything went wrong, he would definitely kill her immediately. Jingwan kept looking at Li Hongyuan. She would not say things like, "Don't worry about me," because even if she did, he would not listen. Suddenly, she turned to look at Sun Yilin. Her eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred. Really, she had never hated a person so much, even when Ruan Fangfei schemed against her Luo family. Sun Yilin's heart was ruthlessly stabbed. Compared to being completely indifferent to him, perhaps it was worth being happy about. However, a deep hatred would still make one's heart ache. Because of the chaos, because Li Hongyuan's people had already killed until their eyes were red, they would only ruthlessly kill the enemies near them. Their attention towards the outside would naturally weaken. The only one who could still divert 1 or 2 points of attention was probably Li Hongyuan. Because he had someone to protect him, and also because he had to protect Jingwan. The former created a distraction for him, while the latter forced him to divert his attention. Whether or not it would succeed, it was really hard to say. However, it still succeeded. "What are you doing in a daze, still not killing them?" Guard Sun's assassin was very excited, very excited. As long as Jin Qinwang died, as long as he died, however, before they could move, screams sounded from the outside. The clattering of horse hooves, the sound of arrows piercing through the air, and accompanied by a shout of "Kill without mercy," more and more soldiers fell to the ground. And just at this time, Li Hongyuan's shadow guards once again made their move. This time, there was a purpose. They brought Li Hongyuan out and tore open a hole on the outside. The 2 sides converged, and Li Hongyuan was completely safe. And those garrison troops were still being ruthlessly strangled, without any power to resist. The scene was quickly cleared. However, the people who came to rescue did not dare to make a sound. Just now, there was still a chaotic battle, but now, there was a deathly silence. During this time, Jingwan had already been brought a considerable distance away. Guard Sun's back was against a tree, and Jingwan was in front of him, vigilantly looking left and right. Whenever someone took a step forward, the dagger pressed against Jingwan's neck would sink deeper. And Sun Yilin had also leaned over at the very beginning. So now, it was 3 people on the opposite side facing 300 people on this side. This situation was somewhat similar to the initial confrontation. However, there was obviously a huge difference. Previously, even if Li Hongyuan and the others were in a weaker position, they were still calm. Now, alright, among the 3 people, only Guard Sun could not stop trembling. Only, his trembling hands caused the dagger to continue to sink deeper into Jingwan's flesh bit by bit. Li Hongyuan saw this and felt pain in his heart. However, he did not let it out easily. But the anger in his heart was terrifying. He Zhihai, who came to rescue, could not help but swallow his saliva. It should be known that he was one of the people who was least afraid of Li Hongyuan. Now, even he could not help but want to keep a distance. However, things were getting troublesome. He Zhihai scratched his head and cursed in his heart. Who the hell were these people? They actually dared to pull a tooth from the tiger's mouth. They were simply too old and tired of living. Sun Yilin suddenly reached out and grabbed Guard Sun's hand, making him move his hand away. Jingwan did not take the stabbing pain to heart. Like Li Hongyuan most of the time, it was as if she did not feel pain at all. She only had Li Hongyuan in her eyes. He was the only person she cared about at the moment. Li Hongyuan knew what Sun Yilin wanted, but he did not seem to be very sure. For a moment, he did not speak. Meanwhile, Sun Yilin's heart was as calm as still water, and he had no intention of speaking. It was both difficult and easy to deal with Li Hongyuan, because he was hard to chew on, and once his weakness was grasped, it would be easy to deal with him. After this battle, it would probably become the consensus of the world. In the end, it was Li Hongyuan who lost his cool first. This was also inevitable. What do you want? What do I want? To be honest, Sun Yilin wasn't very sure. Even if he had taken the risk to capture Jingwan, he wasn't sure what his initial motive was. He did not want to hurt Jingwan, and he did not want to capture Jingwan to completely escape. After all, if he left just now, the arrest warrant would not take long to follow him like a shadow. But obviously not. Was it to see Li Hongyuan being controlled by him and being submissive? In fact, it was not. In Sun Yilin's heart, excluding Jingwan, he actually admired Li Hongyuan. Lu Qingdi had so many sons, but he did not like any of them. His cousin Prince Kong was quite unbearable. When Li Hongyuan first showed signs in front of him, he felt the power of an emperor from him. At that time, he actually had a choice in his heart. So, what did he want to do now? Well, he really did not know. Sun Yilin was very clear-headed, but his mind seemed to be very muddled. He felt like he did not know what was going on. There was the sound of horse hooves again, but this time, it was very clear. There was only one horse. Looking back, he did not need to see very clearly to know that it was Jingwan's maid, Little Black. Little Black was indeed unique compared to other people. However, Little Black did not come alone. In front of her, there was a person lying horizontally. As they approached, Black Sister turned over and pulled down the person on the horse's back. Compared to Little Black, the person was just a weak woman. Being caught by Little Black, she was very embarrassed. She staggered and struggled to stand firm. Sun Yilin, if you dare to hurt the princess, I'll skin her alive. Little Black's eyes were fierce. At the same time, the woman in her hand was strangled by Little Black. Her face was pale and even a little green. It was enough to prove that Little Black was absolutely not joking. And this person, Jingwan naturally recognized, Min Xiaoyuan. Li Hongyuan naturally knew Min Xiaoyuan very well. At this time, a deep thought flashed in his eyes. He thought about some things carefully and came to a conclusion. Min Xiaoyuan was not so unimportant to Sun Yilin. On the contrary, she might be very important. From Sun Yilin's attitude towards her, she had a place in his heart. On a deeper level of analysis, this place was very, very important. Because to a certain extent, Min Xiaoyuan was actually Sun Yilin's only one. Now, there were still people who still cared about Sun Yilin, such as Sun Yijia and old Madame Sunday. However, these two people had more important things. Their thoughts on him would become weaker as time passed. He used to have a servant who never left him. However, that servant had already fallen into the hands of Li Hongyuan's subordinates. He had been tortured, and now it was unknown whether he was alive or dead. Min Xiaoyuan was not only the only person who stayed by his side, but she had also given him her absolute sincerity and passionate feelings. Sun Yilin had never met anyone else who had given everything to him, and he probably would not meet anyone else in the future. Could he really be indifferent when she was in danger? Li Hongyuan's eyesight was very good. Although Sun Yilin was covered tightly and his hands were behind his back, he still faintly noticed that something was wrong with him. Little Blackie, let her go first. Little Blackie naturally would not disobey his words. Min Xiaoyuan had gradually lost consciousness. When she was suddenly released, a mouthful of air was suddenly injected into her lungs. She coughed fiercely. Her throat was burning with pain, and she gradually woke up. Perhaps because of the coughing, her physiological tears could not stop falling. She looked very pitiful. After recovering, her eyes stared at Sun Yilin without blinking. As she looked, her tears fell even more fiercely. This was obviously not caused by physiological reasons. There are some things that you should have said earlier. Why didn't you say earlier? Min Xiaoyuan seemed to be blaming him, but she was more sad. She was extremely sad. Still, no one spoke. It's not that I can't get married. Why do I have to follow you shamelessly? Min Xiaoyuan's voice lowered. However, I am not reconciled to come to this point today. Why can you be so cruel and so heartless? The person you have in your heart is a married woman. It's fine if you can't forget her, but you still do crazy things because of your own selfishness. Are you still a human? The saddest thing is that even if you are not a human, I still like you. It's me who is cheap. However, Sun Yilin, if I die, will you open your eyes and look at me? Min Xiaoyuan looked at him like that, but in her eyes, Sun Yilin was always indifferent. The last brilliance in Min Xiaoyuan's eyes disappeared. As the saying goes, there is no greater sorrow than the death of the heart. If you want to use me to threaten Sun Yilin, now you have the wrong idea. He is not a human for a long time. However, you can kill me. I can't live anymore. Min Xiaoyuan's voice was low. What she said were her last words. However, just as Min Xiaoyuan closed her eyes, Sun Yilin moved. He lifted his leg and walked over step by step. He had only taken 3 steps when with a shrill sound, an arrow flew out and pierced through his thigh above his knee. However, he didn't seem to feel it and continued to limp forward. With another shrill sound, another arrow was shot in the same place on his other leg. His speed slowed down, but he didn't stop. When the 3rd arrow was shot, the target was Sun Yilin's arm. Min Xiaoyuan heard the movement and opened her eyes. She was shocked beyond words. When she saw the 4th arrow piercing his other arm, she suddenly struggled frantically and almost broke free from He Mei's shackles. Stop shooting, please stop shooting. Min Xiaoyuan broke down. However, Min Xiaoyuan's words were obviously useless. However, enough. Jingwan's 2 words made the people who were still aiming put down their hands. The reason why Jingwan spoke up was not because she felt sympathy for Sun Yilin, but because of Min Xiaoyuan and her feelings for her. At the same time, Jingwan felt that the shackles on her back were almost gone. She quickly dodged. The people who were aiming at Guard Sun with their crossbows fired together. In the blink of an eye, Guard Sun became a hedgehog and couldn't be more dead. Li Hongyuan rushed to Jingwan's side almost immediately. When he saw the small bloody hole on Jingwan's neck and shoulder, his face was terrifyingly gloomy. Gong Jiu also rushed over. Fortunately, there was still some distance between the blood vessels. With some medicine, a scab would quickly form. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.